Today's talk time. I thought it would be nice to talk about grief and how that affects us in different areas of our life. Today we've got Teresa Saunders joining me. I'm Meredith McCarthy, your guide, and I hope you enjoy this journey.
Hi Meredith, hi everyone.
Hello. So I thought we would talk a little bit about how often we can be emotionally triggered when we've gone through something like grief. And, it takes time to sometimes process grief, doesn't it?
Can take many years for some people. You can't put really a time frame on that emotion, unfortunately.
Well, there are many reasons why someone might be in grief as well. And I think the typical grieving is when someone passes and, you've lost a loved one. And obviously grief is part and parcel of that process. And it's very natural and normal to feel very, very strong emotion during that time that over a period of time starts to fade.
I think they say grief is one of the most profound emotions that we feel as humans.
For sure. And that shows the level or gravity of love we can feel towards someone.
Or something, because like you were sort of veering off to, grief doesn't actually necessarily need to be attached to a personal loss, as in a person, a human being loss, does it?
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about this idea and thinking about, other things that we grieve over. And you mentioned before, losing a house or something like that. Do you want to just share that with everyone?
Well, like an attachment to a place. You could actually have been brought up in a place that you really would loved and you had deep emotions, positive connections to that place. And then later on in life, for whatever reason, maybe it's a fire or it was knocked down for development, you've lost that place, and that can really have an impact on your emotional well-being.
I mean, even now as an adult, I have dreams of that house that I was mostly raised in as a child, and they have fond memories of the spaces and places I used to hang out in the garden and in the driveway. And I remember the goldfish pond and all these little wee special spaces as a child. And now it has been completely demolished and developed. Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that my parents still live in the same place where I grew up. They lived in the same house since they got married. It's had some refurbishments and that done and extensions. But I don't live there anymore because that was in England. So I live in New Zealand. But, when I go back to visit, there's just this sort of overwhelming like satisfaction or coming home sort of feeling because I've got such strong attachments to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at that idea of strong attachments and then suddenly losing that could be through divorce or, a separation from someone. So they haven't actually died, but they're suddenly not part of your world anymore like they used to be. That can definitely cause someone to go through those stages of grief.
Or a friend. Sorry.
No, what are your thoughts on that?
For sure. And like even a friend that you've had for some time and their situation has changed and they need to move away so that you can't have such one-on-one contact so frequently, that can be a big grieving loss for people because it's a huge change and can cause trauma.
Absolutely. A lot of people talk about stages of grief, and there are different stages that people journey through, and there have been different ideas around grief actually that have evolved over time. One is that first of all, denial. People go into shock. They can't believe it's true. And that can make a big difference to how they're going to process things. So if you're still in denial, you're hoping that maybe something will rekindle or things will get back on track, and you may be holding out for that. And I've certainly met a few clients who have had a really hard time of letting go of a relationship And one person comes to mind, and her husband had literally got married, moved on, and she still thought that maybe he might change his mind and come back.
Yeah,
So
it's very hard.
Yeah, really, really hard. And so, a lot of times people do have this delayed response of coming to terms that something's changed because their brain can't compute it. So that denial can be very, very strong. It can linger for many years, many, many years.
For sure. And I mean, depending on what model you're looking at, there could be various different stages that people say that grief process goes through. Can't there be?
Absolutely. So if we look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think that's how you pronounce the name, that is from a book on death and dying from 1969. She proposed there are 5 stages of grief, and that tends to be the most popular one that people tend to move towards. The second stage that she talks about is anger.
Yeah.
So really getting annoyed about the situation. And I've certainly met my fair share of clients who are in that stage that just, it's eating them up inside. They're not sleeping, they're just churning in their mind about the whole situation, and they find it really hard to let go of that anger.
For sure. And I mean, when we were talking about grief being related to different things, not just people passing on, it can be pets, as simple as like a child's goldfish or a dog, and they can go through all these emotions exactly the same as an adult would do, and of the grieving of somebody, a loved one, for the same emotions as a fish. So grief is something that isn't spoken about a lot, I don't think, but it has really strong emotional connections too.
Yeah. I remember, I guess, a moment where I realized what death was and the permanence of it. And I had lost my brother when I was 4 years old, but I didn't have the concept of I'll never see him again. So he used to visit me in my dreams. So I didn't feel like he had gone. So my young mind created this ability to connect to him every night when I'd go to sleep. And then I remember something big happened at my school, and I was talking about that the other day to you, I believe. And there was a girl called Rosemary, and she got bowled over on the crossing. It was a hit and run, and she got killed. And everyone sort of huddled together, and I remember the class all coming together and the teacher coming in and explaining what had happened and that she had died and that she won't be coming back. And I think the penny dropped in my young mind of Brendan and that he won't be coming back. And I think I cried for the next 3 days because I suddenly realized he wasn't going to return. And I had a dream, and he came to me in my dream. This is my brother. And he said, I can't keep visiting you anymore, Meredith. I have to move on. And that was all around that time. So my young brain was working out what was happening. And then suddenly it realized, oh, okay, so he's not going to be part of my journey moving forward.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I have 2 main things of recollection of grief from people passing. And that would be when I was not quite 7, my grandfather unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. He'd retired on the Friday and passed away on Sunday, just laid down after dinner and had a heart attack, which was a real shock. And we didn't have a telephone at that time. So my grandfather lived in London, and we lived in the country and were quite rural. And a policeman came to notify my mum that her dad had passed away, and my dad and my sister were out. And I still have strong, vivid memories of the police car pulling up and coming down the drive, and mum was pruning the roses at the time, and the policeman made mum cry. And I remember kicking the policeman in the shins because he'd upset my mum, and I really had, and crying and that. And then a dear friend of mine, she passed away when we were 12, 13 years of old of a horse riding accident. And the grief that went through all of that, all those stages of the grief and the process that you wouldn't see your friend, and how important it is to leave on a kind note when you see people.
Yeah.
Because and I'll share this, and her mum might well listen to this, and even her sister, and they're still over in England. And I remember my last words to her. We were walking home from the school bus, and she'd just got a new pair of jeans. And she said, "Does my bum look big in these?" And I said, "Well, that depends on what you call big." And that was my last words to her. And she'd asked if I would go out prior to that on the horse for a ride, and I said I was busy. So unfortunately, it was only her that had gone out. And yeah, that accident, which unfortunately she never recovered from.
Yeah. You never do know, do you? And in times like that, it happens, and it can be this big ricochet, this big shock, and it starts a reflection process in all of us, as we start to come to terms. Talking about comes to terms, there's that bargaining stage of grief as well, and that is trying to make sort of regain control, and if only I'd done this differently. And if we think about that moment that you were talking about, you might go, yeah, if only I'd said, yeah, you look amazing, or whatever. That
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I must say I was really blessed. My father, our last conversation that he had before he passed away, is he was quite ill, and I said, "Do you think it's time to come down and live with me in Wellington?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think that would be good." And I said, "That's good. I love you."
Oh.
And that was it. And it was just the most perfect conversation I could have wished for. And so, yeah, you just never know with people. And when I'm just tearing up thinking about it, but it is a moving, and I feel blessed that I have had that moment. But yeah, we don't always end, or on a nice note with those that we love the most.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad between me and her, but I wish it had been something better. But I guess the point I'm trying to put over is we never know when it is our time to leave Earth. When we're going to see our dear ones again. We just take it for granted that we're going to see them the next day, and the next week, and the next month.
Absolutely. So, when we're looking at the fourth stage is depression, and that can definitely hit people hard. And maybe you just feel like you don't have your normal spring, in your step. You feel like you're getting up and you're tired, and you're not enjoying the things that you used to. And you don't feel like you'll ever be happy again. There might be that kind of real doomy, gloomy sort of feeling. And that's a very real and normal stage. And I just want to say something about this. A lot of people at this point will go and get medicated. They'll go to the GP and they'll get put on some antidepressants. Please let your body do what it naturally needs to do, so you can actually process this properly. As soon as we start to take medication, we're numbing our mind. We're not really letting it process the stuff that is natural and normal to process. And I find it quite frustrating, actually, that GPs are very quick to write a script for something that is natural in the way of grief, and just reassuring that person it's going to pass, it will get better. This is a big part of that grief cycle. It's not going to be as devastating as it is at the beginning. Saying that, it can come in different orders. And before we get to that last stage of acceptance, we might cycle through the other stages quite a lot. And that could come out of the blue, where maybe it's an anniversary of something, or maybe that time of year there was a tree in blossom and it reminds you of that person that passed away, or something else where maybe it's their favorite food and suddenly you smell it and it comes, back to you, and that nostalgia hits you really hard, and you feel it as if it was yesterday, that can happen for quite some time.
Yeah, and I don't think you ever get rid of grief in some ways. You just learn to manage that in a more positive way and look at the happy moments and things that have happened in your life, to get that acceptance. But I don't think we ever totally get rid of the grief of losing someone or something dear to us.
I think we must celebrate all of our emotions, actually, as a human being. That's what we're meant to be experiencing, is all of the richness of all that life brings, as well as loss that we experience. It's all part of the journey of learning and evolving. We go through reflections, and that can often course correct how we do things next time. That there's all sorts of hidden opportunities that come from losing something or someone.
And on that note, did you know, like in Chinese medicine, that grief is associated with the lungs?
No, I didn't.
Fascinating. If you think about our behavior and all that lot, and how we sort of find it difficult to breathe, and those emotions that go through are very chest related, aren't they? So in Chinese medicine, it's related to the lungs. And I often get people to do a few additional things for themselves that they can use for helping with grief. Through that is that your ring finger, it's best to do with both. You don't have to, but you take one of your hand and you just gently grasp your ring finger, and you put pressure on it and pull it, and that can help release the negative chi. And if you think about your ring finger, that denotes like marriage and unity, doesn't it? So that's another thing there that can help. And also your collarbone, you can press underneath your collarbone, and
Just
also
underneath.
just underneath your collarbone.
Okay.
So that's an acupressure point. Again, can help release with the lungs. And in the crease of your wrist, again, you press that, and that's another point that can help with grief and sadness.
Really nice to know. I mean, we are mind and body, aren't we? When we're looking at our body's meridians or energy that flowing all the time, acupuncture or acupressure can be really effective to help process things. My Chinese friend who does acupuncture, he calls those blocks stagnation. It's like a stale pond, and when you stimulate that, it helps the water flow again.
It should be moved through. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Teresa.
That's okay.
When we're thinking about, as hypnotherapists, how we help people through grief, I think first of all, just being able to hear them. A lot of times people are quietly suffering, and to be able to go to a safe place and be heard is the first therapeutic step, that you are creating a rapport, a connection, an understanding in a space where they feel safe enough to be able to process something that's going on for them on the inside. The other thing that you can achieve with a hypnotic journey is the letting go in a very ceremonial way. So you can assist that client to think about how they need to let that go, and guide them through a process of letting go and how they want the future to be. So you can start to help them to imagine that future that they want to welcome in. And under hypnosis, that can be extremely healing for someone to experience.
What are your thoughts, Meredith, on time of when somebody seeks hypnotherapy to help them with grief? Like, I personally believe that as soon as you're ready, you don't have to wait a long period of time to go through that, because why put yourself under more stress, or Yeah. What are your take on that sort of thing?
I think the most common ones I see, to be fair, ones that have just broken up from someone, like it might be a long-term relationship, 10 years, 15 years, and they may seek help within a week. But to be fair, most people who have gone through a loss of someone who's passed away or died, you might not see them presenting for another 6 months to a year or more. And then they start to talk about the grief, because they know intuitively it's normal and natural to feel grief for a period of time. But what tends to occur is when they can't shift it, when it's getting in the way, that's where they tend to seek help. Whereas if someone's split up from someone, they want to process this quickly. So if they bump into them or need to still have a relationship of some kind, maybe they've got children that they have to look after or whatever, they need to come to a place where they feel strong enough or confident enough to be able to do that and have that connection with that person, or to actually let that person go completely. So there's a lot of people who find it really hard not to message or not to reconnect again and again and again to a toxic relationship that maybe has lingered too long. So that's often a reason why someone might pop into the office and seek some help.
Yeah, there's no reason though either, like why somebody that is actually going through that grieving process of a loved one that doesn't come and visit you during those stages of grief to help them move along with the anger or depression or whatever as well. Because with hypnotherapy we can help, can't we, with those emotions too?
Yeah, there's also, and we were talking about this earlier, and what comes to mind is cancer. Okay, so let's say you have a loved one who's got the long cancer journey, and it might be even 3 to 4 to 5 years that they're gently suffering with cancer. It can really change how the whole family dynamic is, and that you're grieving for something that you know you're going to lose, but you haven't lost them yet, but you're losing the essence of who they used to be as they become more and more unwell, and that can be quite hard. So I definitely advise people, if you're in that struggle where you're trying to come to terms with that person's inability to do those things that normally they would have been able to do, the loss of independence, and grieving that person while they're still alive, that's definitely something to get support with.
I'm just going to talk about this one quickly, which it is about grief, but it's not really, because also as hypnotherapists we can help with like end of life and coming to terms with that as well, can't we? Did you want to explain to people a bit more how with hypnotherapy we do this?
Yeah, I've done that a lot actually, journeyed people who've been diagnosed with terminal illness, and also worked alongside their family as well. So when we're looking at the idea of supporting someone to come to terms with the fact that they're going to not see their children anymore or not being around for that, that can be a really, really scary thing for them to talk about to their actual loved ones, because they don't want to upset their loved ones. And so there's a lot going on for that person to come to terms with letting go of those goals, dreams and aspirations, knowing that it's not going to happen. But for a very long time, often they'll still have a lot of hope that they'll turn around and everything will get better and they'll be well. And during the journey with a person who has terminal illness of any kind, it may not just be cancer, by the way, it could be something else that's going on. It's important that they have a chance to talk about what's going on for them. They have that witness there for those closure moments. And quite often they'll share parts of their life. So you become a witness in celebrating those little wee things that they've gone and achieved in their lifetime as well, where their family may not be equipped to do that, or they may not be that close to their family to have those kind of conversations and acknowledgements. But sometimes people pass away with a lot of anger towards certain family members as well, and it gives them a chance to maybe make peace with them. So I'll quite often talk about those tricky relationships and get them to really ask, what is it? If you could say what you need to say before you pass, what is that conversation? And they may not be capable of having that conversation with that person in real life, but they can absolutely have that conversation in a hypnotic process. And that can be very, very healing for people, and it can help them to pass more gently and easily. So, yeah, it is quite a big topic, actually, this one. But, yeah, for those involved, also people, which comes to mind now, you might have a family member who isn't necessarily that user-friendly, that is terminal. So they've got a terminal illness and they've come home for you to look after, and they're not so nice. They're not user-friendly, and that can ricochet through the family quite a lot. And so a lot of people don't talk about that, because just because someone has terminal illness doesn't instantly make them a nice person. And that can be a real hard, tricky situation to journey. So definitely I get a lot of combinations where there have been family rifts and other things that have gone down, and people need to find a way to sit with that and journey that in the best possible way for everyone. We talk about boundaries, we talk about what's possible and what's not, and looking at things in a realistic way. How much they feel they can give and how much they can't, and what that looks like, and what kind of conversation they can and can't have. Yeah.
As you say, it can come into a very big topic, grief, because it ricochets into lots of different areas as well that branch off. So was there anything else you wanted to discuss today on that grief?
Well, on the grief, I think grief of a job as well. Like, some people are laid off and it's all of a sudden, and they don't know who they are without that job. It's been a big part of who they've been for the last odd years, And so that sense of identity and that feeling of grieving is a really real thing. And I think we must acknowledge that. And if you are someone who is out there who's lost their job, and it wasn't necessarily something you even thought could happen, that you were going to sort of journey into retirement with it, and it didn't happen like that, that can really take someone back for a while. So please, do get out there and get some help. You don't need to suffer and try and process this all by yourself. Hypnotherapy is a really useful tool to help you to accelerate that processing and get you back on track, and maybe help you work out what comes next.
Because life does throw us some unexpected curveballs, doesn't it?
No straight lines in nature.
This is very true.
On that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this chat today. We're going to do more of these emotional trigger talks and talk about all sorts of things in the series. So thank you, Teresa, for coming along and chatting about this. And we also have the school. If you want to learn how to become a hypnotherapist, you can visit the website for more information. We have a rolling intake, so it doesn't matter that we've started for the year. You can start any time during the year, and you can just catch up the next year. So that's nzach.ac.nz. So you can go and check out our prospectus, download it, and connect with me for a discovery call if you'd like. But, it is a really amazing career to hop into. It's very rewarding, where you see solutions at the end. You see positive outcomes, people who come in and they don't even know how to sleep at night, what to do with themselves, and then suddenly, they're in a better place. And it's a very, very, again, solution-focused option.
And no 2 days are the same, eh?
That's right, absolutely. Now, remember too, it would be really helpful if you like this, to like it and follow us and subscribe. The more people who like this stuff, the more the algorithm finds us and the more we can kind of get it out into the world. I want to share my knowledge. I would like to leave a legacy behind. One day I will pop my clogs, and I'd like to think that there's some information that I was able to share out into the world in a way that was digestible and helpful to people.
And if you have a comment, drop it in the comments below. Or if you don't want to go public, then drop us an email.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, and we'll be here same time next week. It goes out every Wednesday morning New Zealand time at 7 a.m. on the dot. And we've gone over a year now doing these, so it's pretty cool.
And we're still here. Many more years to go. Okay, till next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.